Hello, and welcome back once again to Session 10 of Behind the Sessions. Alright, so this time we unfortunately had to say goodbye to a dear friend at the table and a dear friend to the party in the game, as the new Zach, temporarily being, who was Goldkick of course, was unfortunately not able to continue playing at the table and playing a part of our campaign, as, and I'm not sure if I recall saying this last time or not, but in case I didn't, poor old Zach, who played Golgak, was not able to continue because he was currently a DM at the time at an entirely separate game that he was running alongside the time my campaign was going. It worked out that one time we could get him in the same day we were able to steal his player Quentin for the first time, who was playing She. And as alluded to last time, we did, unfortunately, and I feel a little bad still, but it was all consensual, everyone was okay with it. I had everyone's permission first. We did take and keep Quentin to continue playing She and preserve him for the rest of the campaign. So in order to send off Golkak effectively, I had yet another good talk with the player Zach behind the scenes. Behind the session, I guess I could say. Very funny. To me. And then, once we had a discussion about where he saw his character going, what his character would like to do, we came to the conclusion, yes, it would be really neat if we had more of his backstory from where he came from in the Goliath Mountains, and having a character like Vaughn, a good friend of his, be the one to, I suppose, recommend him to come and be a blacksmith like he wanted to, as he did leave behind the Golkaks in the mountains for a reason, to start a new life, to not be a part of that culture and be a part of his people anymore, wanting to make a life for his own and struck his own way out. I should clarify for the sake of complete transparency, Vaughn as a character did not exist as at the time of this game, which is why I definitely don't want to say too much. Retroactively, Vaughn is now the friend of Golkak. At the time, we did have a stand-in character that was much less fleshed out, much more ambiguous. Who was a good friend back in the tribe of Golkak, who plays that same role, but he was, I suppose, retconned, we could say, into being Vaughn later on. And I'll say no more about that, lest I give too much implication or foreshadowing to the future. That does not need to exist within this period of talking now. But maybe one day, those listening to this will be able to appreciate how cool it is that we get to put Vaughn in that part of the story. Now, moving on. Obviously, they get dropped off. He gets to go be an apprentice to this master blacksmith, and we hopefully get to see him again at some point in some variety. Then there's the unfortunate part where Dane gets broken up with, which was, really fun, of course, as a monstrous DM. It wasn't really that enjoyable. I did not look forward to having to be the one who kind of has to come forth and be like, hey, here's romance introduced to the mechanics of the game and the role play that we've never done before. Here you go, players. This is what romance feels like. This is what it's like to have a dynamic and a flirtation, and sort of like an ongoing, building, blossoming sort of dynamic between yourself and an NPC non-player character. And now here's what it feels like when you get dumped and left behind. So, what a wonderful feeling that must have been. In just a short span of time, too. Only technically having met her properly at the start of the last session. It does feel like what time they did have, albeit extremely short, which, who knows, maybe one day will become a bit of a common theme, is what was very special and meant a lot while it lasted. And so poor old Dane has to be a little bit heartbroken and devastated from roughly the start of the session. But it does make for quite a fun and interesting dynamic as he gets to go vent his frustration the same way he's always done and meets a new character to make up for poor old Zook being taken away by the Frostwalkers. That was a lot of fun. That was very exciting. Especially with the whole... well, I've said this before, I believe I said this previously, and in case I understand in full volume, because I have been a while, I forget what I say each time I do one of these behind the sessions. Again, they're not scripted. I can once again reiterate, with the introduction of Carrick as Zack, not Goldcake Zack, other Zack, the Zack we've originally had who played Zook, then played Palin, and is now playing Carrick. Palin, well, moving further back from that, Zook, obviously psychopathic, a creation, a manifestation of a character that exists because of what we'd call a lack of experience. Sorry if you're hearing the popping sound. Hopefully that stops in a minute. Oh dear. Let's try to ignore that. Zack played Zook, which was in essence a character made from someone who had a very, very little to non-existence, no experience with D&D as a concept. Playing it closer to Skyrim, every alarm is going off right now. Hopefully you guys can't all hear that. I do apologise. And after trying to play the game like Skyrim, try to just kill what he wants, loot whatever body, and do his old thing, and eventually rather quickly, that catches up with him and he goes, oh, I'm being realistically punished, like this is more like a real-life simulation than it is like a video game with exploitable AI, and now the consequences of my actions have very much come for me, in a very believable fashion that I did dig myself a hole into, and that was a good lesson very early on in the game for Zack to learn, of course, as he's continued to prove and will continue to prove even more now. Learns very quickly how well to adapt to this sort of situation, become quite good at his acting and his role playing. And Palin was, I suppose, in a lot of ways, because of the unexpected nature of Zook's demise, Palin was a character that was somewhat forced upon him quickly and without a lot of warning. And while he'd showed enough interest in the idea of considering playing a paladin alongside a few other classes he was considering, and when I heard that, I was like, oh yes, you want to play a paladin? Maybe playing a character who's like much more like righteous and good, and like got a golden heart would be a better juxtaposition from playing the murderous psychopath. Better to not just have like a ongoing theme of murder hobos. So I very much tried to definitely push him and encourage him to be like, okay, try playing a paladin, try playing a character, see how much fun you can find, playing characters has to do the right thing. And as we all saw, he most certainly was different from Zook. He definitely improved, and he definitely did a better job than being like a murder hobo. He did restrain himself from, doing anything too crazy, but he was a bit of a loot goblin, he still had his bad habits and blah blah blah, and one could be forgiven for mistaking at that point thinking, oh, maybe it's just the way that Zack as a person likes to play his characters. He just can't help but be a bit more like, morally ambiguous and do some like shady things, and that's fine. I don't think there's an actor in the world who doesn't have a bit of themselves in most of their roles, even to small aspects, like people who, good people who play villains, him being an example of that, where on some level there's a part of yourself that's always in the character, and that's how it should be. That to say though, I was really blown away, and I hope in time when you see more of his character you all will be as well, to see how much Palin obviously walked so that Carrick could now run. As Carrick, I absolutely believe, becomes an absolute staple, very, very good character that I like quite a lot. And I'm just very impressed after having two characters back-to-back that seemed around the same area of morality. Not the same, but definitely close. Having him switch up entirely with Carrick, this time having more time to play Palin and realise, damn, I'm not really living up to being like the good Palin I was intending to be. My vices, my habits got the better of me, and I still end up playing a character that was, on the dicier side of a good citizen. I say that so subtly. He dug up dead bodies from the church that he used to work at. I feel like we can say he's a bad person. It's okay. Palin was not a good dude. Of course we miss him, but I don't have to be so coy or so polite about it. This guy definitely earns some scorn. Carrick, however, would go on to be a character, as you'll soon see, who was not only incredibly selfless and generous, having very little earthly possessions, and what small amount of coin or money he had, he would happily give away to those that were needier or more deserving of it than what he was. So extremely selfless, very much an actual hero, at least to a large degree, when the other two couldn't fit the same category. As Carrick actually does truly care about people, he goes out of his way to help individuals and asks for nothing in return. On some level, he just kind of gets to be, as you'll see, the medieval Batman, and it's just pretty interesting to see, and I like that. Apologise, you can hear even more noise of something driving by outside. It seems today everything is happening as I start recording, but we're so far in that I wouldn't want to stop and restart all over again. I try not to do that with the unscripted thing in the first place. Anyway, assuming you can't hear it, I'll just keep on ignoring the sound of the truck when it is going by. Once we establish that we have Carrick now, which is interesting, and I suppose you'll see as much more of his character as we come to be, but appreciate the fact as you watch that, keep in the back of your mind, the same guy who plays Carrick and the way that Carrick acts and what he does is the exact same person that was once Zook, which really made me super start to appreciate the role play and acting role aspect and talent of our player Zach, and of course, speaking of good role-playing and good actors as players to characters, we have another one later in the session about with our Quentin and She, which we'll get to as well. But it's worth taking a moment to point out before we get there that this is the first time in over 5 months in real life at the time that our players at the table had actually finally, since Session 1, returned to Bristol, I suppose for a part of Session 2 as well, but Session 1 was where the Were-Rats, were first introduced, and of course, I suppose we did see... So Session 1 and Session 2, it's been a long time at Session 10 now, since we've been back in Bristol, being able to kind of, especially with the benefit of the time loop, bringing them very much back to only barely over a week since they actually left Bristol originally back in the timeline, they do get to kind of see the much more recent events transpiring right after they have recently officially left at the start of their adventure, as this timeline would pretty closely match up with the time around about Session 4 and 5, give or take, if they had been still in Bristol at this point. So getting to have the Were-Rats come back, as I once back in Session 2 when they got attacked in the alleyway, they also get into the sewers, there was a level I had ready, which is roughly the one you see now, as they finally do get to go into the sewers, make their way through a few traps that the Were-Rats have set out, and find like their pet alligator in the sewers with them that they've been looking after. It was cool to finally be able to reuse that content, as at the time in Session 2 I was a little bit gutted that they didn't at any point want to go check out or follow them through and kind of have their first official dungeon. And I feel like, unless I don't think I'm forgetting anything, I'm pretty sure this is a one-time in the entire first ever campaign of Dungeons & Dragons that I ever DM'd or ran or played in into any capacity, my first experience of it. This is the only actual quote-unquote dungeon in the Dungeons and Dragons game that we ever did for a year, which is crazy to think about, but there it is. Obviously, the sort of the aspect of just dungeon crawling, combat every room for hours on end is absolutely not the sort of thing that appeals to me to any variety whatsoever. So it was, it was nice to be able to get this dungeon in there and as much fun of it as I could. I definitely prefer more story aspect and roleplay and sort of one-off big combats a session instead of a whole litter of little ones when I can help it. Which I certainly do not think I actually took from inspiration of Critical Role. but I do recognise that there is quite a bit of similarity there. In that playstyle, I definitely think, and I'm sure my players could attest to it if you were to be able to hear them say so, about how I actually play at the table. I think there's quite a definitive difference between the style of the game that I play with my players as opposed to how it's done in Critical Role. And that's fine. That's always kind of the idea, right? You always want to avoid the quote unquote Matt Mercer effect, the belief that like if you're not playing it like Critical Role, you're doing it wrong, which is a horrible mindset to get into. But I'm sure even the Critical Role folks would absolutely be horrified to think that people actually think that way, because you can never be those people. Only they can. They will always be, as different individuals from everyone else, always going to bring their own different strengths and assets to the game. Any other table, even if they're similar, will always have differences. And that should never be something that is scary or considered bad. That should be a welcome invitation for every player to be like, oh, cool, exciting. This is going to be our thing. It's going to be done our way. And provided you keep the problematic players and DMs at bay or sent to some variety of dice jail, but for actual people, we should really make a place like that. Call it jail or something. And no, just for me to come in here and be like, oh, hey, I officially endorse anyone who's like not good at playing D&D go straight to actual real life federal prison. Because that would be a horrible thing to imply, and I'd only be half serious. No, all right. I digress. I get back on point. So getting back to Bristol, getting to see the whole thing of Session 1, kind of getting to feel like, oh, we're going back to like where this all started sort of thing, was a wonderful experience to have. It was really fun to kind of like write out some scripts and some details and elements around it. They didn't get to all the things that I might have liked, but they never were going to. It was always a matter of where they'd go. That's the essence of a sandbox campaign, where they have the choice of free roam as they like. And so I absolutely can make my peace with that, not a problem. Yeah, I suppose we'll see in the coming sessions, if they're still in Bristol, if they get to have any more experience with other familiar characters or things that get to pop back up. Getting to see Ickle again was lovely. It was always good when they get to go and visit Ickle. This is the time in the original campaign when the characters really started to fall in love with Ickle and absolutely adore him as a NPC. When they came back to see him again, I think they realised how much they missed him, and he was a lot more fun on a variety of levels. And then I think there's no more to stall or kick around the bucket before we get to. So there is the final part of this this adventure today. After, of course, we do see Zook again, which was quite fun. And of course, they leave him to die, including the person who literally played him last time. Don't want to spoil too much, but if you're watching this in the order that these videos come out, and thus you haven't seen the next episode yet, well, then you're probably going to be able to appreciate the irony of the party all deciding to leave Zook, of all people, to die and be executed. Considering the last time he got executed, things didn't go so well for them. So I wonder what will happen this time. But anyway, no more of that. That's just my own me wondering out loud. Our final part of the day is, of course, getting to have Quentin, who is now a key fourth player of the table for the rest of Wollen, playing the character of She. He had come to me, Quentin, and he had told me the idea as a basic idea of his character he was building out, and he gave me the religious aspect of it that mattered to him. His backstory, he told me, is in entirety. And I won't, of course, give any spoilers or anything that's going to ruin the future where it's going. But I was told about the whole, I'm religious. Mirren was my mentor and was also of the same religion as me. And a little while ago, he abandoned me in the woods. And obviously, I've grown up in this woods and I have these druidic powers. And I was like, cool. Absolutely, fine, that's good. And he gave me the information. He might have given me a tiny bit more than that stuff. And I took that, of course, as you do as a DM, and you kind of recontextualize and goes, okay. And if you're, what I hope is okay to say as a good DM, you'll look at your character, your player character's backstories and go, right, this is cool, this is interesting, this is all this neat stuff they've put in here they want, and this is obviously going to form what they want to see of their story, what they're going to enjoy doing, etc, etc, and you need to respect and honour that, and I never had any intentions of doing otherwise. What I did do, however, as like I like to think any good DM would, is go, right, now what can I add to their story that is going to, A, most certainly, hopefully improve upon it, instead of taking away from it, and 2, what is going to surprise this player without necessarily throwing something at them they had no means to... what is the word I'm trying to say here? You want to surprise them, right? You do want to pull the rug from under them, but you want them to laugh when they hit the floor and they get back up. You don't want to actually seriously hurt them. So while you want to add elements and flavour and flair and maybe throw a few curveballs at your player, you don't ever want to do so in a way that risk too severely taking away from their story. Like, for example, the most cliche, obvious one I can think of, it's just like the most egregious example, like the writing equivalent of, like it was all a dream at the end of this movie, or a book, sorry. It is nothing worse, I imagine, as a player, there goes a pop again, than having that unfortunate circumstance where this player has this whole idea of a backstory, characters, motivations, etc, and then you as a DM take that and then decide, for whatever horrible reason, that you're just going to take all that work and information and that stuff that they're interested in, and then just tell them at some point along the way, like, oh, by the way, you were... your memory was modified, or like everything you thought was real was all an illusion, and here's your actual story, here's these characters, all that stuff that you wanted, didn't happen, didn't exist, and it was all a big trick. Here's my story that I've made for you, you better like it, eat up. That is... I mean, I'm sure that almost never actually happens, because that is the most ridiculously disrespectful and... I don't want to use any harsher words than that, but I think it speaks very poorly to who you are as a person, as a DM, if your whole instinct is to say, hey, I'm going to take away everything that my player asked for and put my stuff there instead. Because you already do that with the rest of the game. For the DM, your whole job is building the rest of the world and everything else. So when you get the players a small aspect of the world, they get to actually have control over and get to have a part that's theirs, that inhabits their character. They could be playing for potentially real life years. What kind of person do you have to be? What kind of ego do you have to be like, oh yes, I feel entitled to take that part that was for them away from them and put more of my stuff in its place. It baffles me that could happen. Anyway, less about what I think of in terms of terrible ideas as a DM, just how to be the worst kind of dungeon master, and more about what actually happened at this end of this episode for this actual behind the sessions you're here listening for. Apologies, as you know by now, I can't help but get carried away talking about my things. Throwing in the idea, when I realised that Mirren was an elf raising she in the forest as a tabaxi, I was like, okay, so probably not quite related. And I was given the sort of the open-ended option to figure out where she would have come from, as that's not information that Quentin gave me, or so it was important to his character, that's something, blah, blah, blah. And of course, keeping in mind and recognising that Quentin would still want to have his religious aspect to the game, his backstory being about trying to find his mental store, without wanting to take anything away from that, only trying to add to it. I thought to myself, well, there's a different aspect to this character that I could surprise him with that could hopefully help improve and inform upon his kind of religious whole backstory that he wants to be involved in, because he has to have a real family. This Wollen island is so isolated away from the other continents of the world, which at this point in time you guys would not have seen yet, and thus it stands to reason his parents, he must have been born and come from this island here somewhere, and so that's when I was kind of filling out the details and the stuff about his backstory, what I was planning for it in the future sessions, and where I wanted to kind of take that story that he had given me the keynotes for. I thought bringing in a family, his actual family, and they weren't terrible. They loved him, they were good, they cared about him, and they missed him, and they welcomed him with open arms, and giving him sort of the reverse of the average player character origin story in most D&D games, by having him actually have like a happy, wonderful, loving family that would happily take him in if they knew where he was. I figured it would work to have it, so that way, as we would see as the session going on, having this very wholesome, very nice, very uplifting moment that was really sweet in my opinion. I did my best to try to make it very, very genuine and very warm and very much a feeling of extreme acceptance when he met his parents. To then have that cliffhanger at the end that his own brother is actually one of the heads of the exact people in his backstory that he's going up against, made for extremely juicy content in the sense of the drama of it all, because it allows him to stall. You know, he feels like he's been taken away from his backstory from him. He goes, oh, a different element of backstory I didn't expect. It's nice, it's wonderful, oh, lovely. We can come back here, see his parents over time. It could be like a central hub for the characters that wanted to stay around Britain for a while. This is wonderful, this is nice. What do you mean my brother is potentially going to kill me? And that wonderful element of having this sort of, without it, his whole religious background would be like, hey, I'm a part of this religion, we're against these guys, and you can imagine how easy it would be to be like, right, so his whole ultimate goal is like, take down the other side. And whether or not he ends up doing that, it becomes so much harder when all of a sudden a brother of his own that has, at least if his brother hates him and is trying to kill him the second we start the next session, at the very least, he likes his parents are really caring and good to him. They don't seem to be fakes that are all pretending. They're not like some scheme of the Sunlight Church. So that means he's well aware that even if he doesn't care about his brother, and even if he's willing to kill him, he's still going to hurt the two people that just brought him in, welcomed him into their home and loved him and openly cared about him. And making there actually be a reason not, I suppose, not in trying to a reason not to do it, but rather having a degree of resistance, a degree of of difficulty in what should otherwise be the simple choice of his entire character. It's like, hey, I'm supposed to take down the other church, I'm supposed to take down this religion that is against my one. And by making there be actually stakes to him personally in accomplishing his goal, not just... I've just continued to gush, I'll start talking in circles, but hopefully you can recognise what I'm saying, and that I find it, and I hope, and I think Quentin very much agrees, thankfully, that me adding this family aspect, this domestic aspect to his character, that then ties back into his religious background and his motivations as a character, and makes it all the much more nuanced in how he goes about achieving the goals that he may set out for or not, makes for a far more compelling story element to the entire overarching story arc and background that he's trying to achieve. And that's all I have to say for the time being. Obviously, next time you'll be able to go and see how it feels when his brother comes into conflict in the same bloody room as his own parents, and how they all ultimately have to navigate that. But I'll say no more, and I'll leave you to look forward to enjoying the next episode when it comes out. Thank you very much for listening once again. Sorry if it's yet another 30-minute video of talking, but at this point I think I've exhausted all my options, and I look very much forward to seeing where we go as we draw closer and closer now towards the slowly building episode 15 finale. That I really shouldn't allude to anything just yet. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you next time.